Hello everybody, and welcome to another Spring Into Storytime event. My name is Peter. Today I'm going to bring you a story from the Tales from Leprechaun Land, and this one is called Brendan and the Blarney Stone. So let's get started. So here we are. Brendan and the Blarney Stone. Written by Stephen Walsh and Marita O'Donovan, illustrations by Diane Le Feyer, and published by the O'Brien Press in Dublin. And just before we get started, here's a little background on the story. So long ago, the leprechauns came to a place where a river gleamed among the rolling hills and tall trees grew. There, hidden from the human world on a carpet of shamrocks at the rainbow's end, they made their home and called it Ballynadinibeg. Now see the little star beside Ballynadinibeg? If we look down at the bottom, that tells us what it means. So here we go at the bottom. Ballynadinibeg, from the Irish, meaning town of the little people. If you ever walk close by, you might just see a wisp of smoke from their turf fires, or hear their music whispering in the wind. Search forever, but you will never find Ballynadinibeg, for it is well hidden by the leprechauns who use their magic to keep it a secret. But look out, the leprechauns may be closer than you think. Okay, here we go. So here's Brendan the leprechaun. Brendan the leprechaun lived in the village of Ballynadinibeg. There he made beautiful musical instruments, and the walls of his little shop were festooned with bowrons, uilleann pipes, tin whistles, fiddles and bows. So there's a fiddle and bow, a bowron, there's the uilleann pipes, and a fiddle. The instruments that Brendan made played music that was sweeter than the sweetest songbird, and leprechauns travelled from the four corners of Ireland to buy his wares, for they knew they were the best in the land. Brendan himself liked to play the tin whistle, and when he played, everyone stopped to listen. The lilt of his music was so lovely that it touched the very hearts of those who heard it. However, Brendan had a problem. The moment he opened his mouth to speak, everything went wrong. His words came out in a terrible jumble, and he always said the wrong thing. This caused Brendan a lot of bother. If he ever went to buy cheese, he might come home with peas, and once, when he went to buy a hat, he came home with a cat. Fortunately, the cat became a beloved pet to Brendan. So Brendan had a problem when he spoke. So let's see some of the words that he mistook and jumbled up. So if he wanted hair, he might say chair, cat instead of a hat, whistle instead of thistle, donkey instead of monkey, pie instead of sky, cheese, peas, plug, slug. I can see how you might get frustrated with that. Every Saturday night, the leprechauns and the fairies gathered for a great ceilidh, where they danced and sang until daybreak. Brendan and his three friends, Murphy, Mossy and Marty, made up the band. Murphy played the uilleann pipes. There's Murphy and the uilleann pipes. Mossy played the fiddle. That's Mossy there, the fiddle. And Marty played the bowron, over there in the corner, with the pipe in his mouth. Brendan played the tin whistle, of course. One of those who loved to listen to Brendan play was the beautiful fairy Nuala, who came to the ceilidh every single Saturday. Brendan was always delighted to see Nuala sitting nearby, tapping her toe in time with the music and smiling towards him. How he longed to ask Nuala to dance, but he was too afraid to even speak to her for fear of what he might accidentally say. I wonder how he's going to get out of this problem. Brendan went to visit Dara, the oldest leprechaun in Ballynadinibeg, so old that he knew the answers to most questions. When Dara heard Brendan's problem, he laughed and said, "Brendan, you must kiss the Blarney Stone. That will give you the gift of the gab and an eloquence beyond your dreams." The very next day, Brendan set about making a plan to kiss the famous stone, and Murphy, Mossy and Marty agreed to help him, just like good friends would do. And that was how the four leprechaun band members found themselves hiding in a little thicket, watching a group of tourists get out of a bus a mile from Ballynadinibeg. Of course, the tourists didn't realize how close they were to Leprechaun's well-hidden home. That would have made their holiday even more special. So here we are, a big group of tourists on a bus, shamrock bus, and they're just viewing the sights. "Who are all these big people?" said Mossy. "They're visitors from other lands," Murphy explained, "who come to see all the wonderful sights in Ireland." Brendan had bought a pocket full of coins Okay. While the visitors were off having lunch, the 4 leprechauns hopped on board the bus and tucked themselves under a seat where no one would see them. Brendan had bought a pocket full of coins. A leprechaun never knows when they might come in handy, and Marty had brought some cheese and shamrock sandwiches. Please pass the peas and hard rock sandwiches, said poor Brendan. Still can't speak, cried Kenny. In no time at all, the visitors trooped back onto the bus and the journey to Blarney began. The leprechauns were very comfortable under the seat, where they had a great view of everyone's shoes. They could hear the tourists chattering away, admiring the mountains and rivers, green fields, farms, the castles and the round towers. Then a lady right above Brendan said, I haven't seen a single leprechaun since I've come to Ireland. The man beside her replied, Well, you'd better keep looking out that window if you want to catch a glimpse of one. Brendan, Murphy, Mossy and Marty tried to stifle their laughter. Imagine the visitors were looking out the window for leprechauns, and 4 of them were under their seats the whole time. At last he arrived at the village of Blarney in County Cork. The sun shone and all the passengers, including 4 rather small ones, got off the bus. The tourists started lining up to go to the castle to kiss the Blarney Stone. Brendan and his friends sat down on the bench and tried to figure out how to get inside without anybody seeing them. There was no obvious entrance for leprechauns. Then Murphy spotted a tattered old coat thrown on the bench and it gave him an idea. Why don't we stand on each other's shoulders and put this coat over us? Then we can look like one of the big people. Good idea. So Marty stood on Brendan's shoulders, Mossy stood on Marty's shoulders, and Murphy stood on Mossy's shoulders, and they hoisted the old coat around them. There was some money in the pocket, which they used to pay the admissions fee, and, apart from a few strange looks from the lady selling the tickets, they managed to make it up the steps, more than 100 of them, to the top of the castle. Off they go. The leprechauns hid in a corner and watched the tourists kissing the Blarney Stone. Now the stone is set on the battlements at the top of the castle, and in order to kiss it, you must lie on your back with somebody holding onto you so you don't slip. There are railings just below to stop people falling to the ground, but, oh dear, a little leprechaun might easily slide through them. At last, as the last of the visitors were going back down the steps, Murphy had another bright idea. Brendan, grab hold of the sleeve of the coat, and we'll use it to swing you out to kiss the stone. We'll swing you 3 times to make sure you manage it. I don't know, is this going to work? So Murphy, Mossy and Marty held firmly onto the coat and swung it out across the battlements, with Brendan clutching tightly to the sleeve. Murphy counted 1. The sleeve swung out with Brendan hanging on, but his eyes were shut and he missed the stone. 2. There was a ripping sound as the stitching in the coat started to come apart, and Brendan, startled by the noise, missed again. 3. The ripping sound got louder, but Brendan managed to stretch out his neck and give the Blarney Stone a great big kiss. Phew, said Murphy, as they hauled Brendan back to safety, and they all laughed and danced around in a happy circle. They grabbed the coat and dragged it down the steps of the castle, then put it back where they had found it on the bench. They could see all the visitors getting back on the bus for the journey home. Come on, said Mossy, we have to run for our bus. Just a minute, said Brendan, who was busy filling the pockets of the coat with gold coins. This old coat was a lucky find for us, so now it will be lucky for someone else. On the homeward journey, Murphy, Mossy and Marty had to shh Brendan at least 20 times. The gift of the gab was working and he was talking 19 to the dozen, thrilled with his new powers of communication. So it worked. The 4 friends ran across home to the fields to Ballynadeenibug, where it was time for the weekly ceilidh. The other leprechauns and fairies were overjoyed to see Brendan and his bands back again. After a couple of jigs and reels, Brendan asked Nuala to dance, and she accepted with delight. He told her of his adventures, without mixing up his words, and how he had kissed the Blarney Stone. Then they danced and they danced. Nice happy ending. Meanwhile, far away in Blarney, an old man who hadn't had a lucky day for years spied the coat lying on the bench. Well, aren't I the lucky one finding this grand old coat, he said. You can imagine how lucky he felt a few seconds later when he put on the coat and put his hands into his pockets. The end. Hope you enjoyed it, everybody, and tune in next week for another story. Take care, bye-bye.